I think after they did a little research and there was several phone calls in there, I think they got a little upset because they turned the heat off in the jail on us, and they give us blankets and stuff, and then hours later told us we were being charged with felonies and that we couldn't leave until we seen a judge in the morning. So it's probably something that's used by discretion in Massachusetts, though I've heard of there's 4 other cases where people have been charged with wiretapping. 2 of them have been dropped because they were openly recording like we were, and then the other 2 were actual cases of wiretapping where you're illegally taping somebody, with a hidden microphone and or camera. So, and none of those, the other 2 that were convicted had nothing to do with police. So it's just a tool that police are using either to trump up more charges on you, or, they like to trump the charges up and then cut you a deal so that you don't fight it as much. But I can't speak for Pete, but I'm pretty sure it's similar. I have the intention of taking it all away. But the one thing
could you clarify real quick, what kind of penalties are you looking at if convicted?
Yeah, well, we have trespassing, resisting arrest, and I think the resisting can get us a couple months, and the trespassing is just a fine. But the felony is obviously a felony, so there's things that come with that. You lose your right to vote if that's something that matters to you, and your right to own firearms and other things, plus jobs, the endless amount of jobs that you can have. But that also has a year-long prison term with it. Pete was actually also charged with not having a card to possess ammunition, though we've never seen, or there's no real proof that they've given us that there was any ammunition in the RV. So
yeah, essentially they threatened to break the window of the RV to get in. We didn't admit ownership, and then when they found keys on my person and my driver's license, I got my driver's license to bail my buddy out. They ran the RV, and then they said they had a right to go in the RV because they said they couldn't see a VIN number on the dash. But it's not like a regular vehicle. There's no VIN number. There's no VIN plate on the dash. So then they went in the RV and searched it. And in that search, they said they found some ammo, which supposedly is illegal in Mass because I don't have a firearm identification card. So I'm charged with a misdemeanor VIN manipulation and then a felony firearm ammo. So that's a few more years.
It's gonna be a hard charge for them to stick on them because the RV is our home. And we live in New Hampshire where you don't have to have silly pieces of paper from the government to possess bullets. So, but yeah, essentially at the end of the day, to answer the question, a couple $1,000s in fines and probably 1 to 3 years in jail. Pete's on the higher end of that because of a couple extra charges.
All right, and I get a slightly, somewhat different perspective on this. It's Redditt Hudson. He is with the ACLU of Eastern Missouri, right here in St. Louis, but he is also a former St. Louis police officer. So he's seen this from both sides. So I think he's on the correct one here. And part of what he does at the ACLU is he leads workshops that educate people about their rights under the law, and including practical advice about how to interact with police. So, Redditt, why don't you tell us about what you think about people filming and specifically, a case like Adam's case?
I totally agree with the idea that we do have the right to videotape police interactions with citizens, and we should. As many of you are from St. Louis, you probably know the ACLU launched a program probably 4 years ago now, called Project Vigilant in North St. Louis in the Fairgrounds Park neighborhood, where we targeted that area because we had a significant number of police complaints over the years coming out of that area, particularly relative to police abuse of their authority on the street during questioning people on the street. So what we decided to do was go into that community and put on Know Your Rights workshops, which are workshops about your constitutional rights, particularly as it relates to interactions with the police. But then we took the very sexy next step of giving out cameras over there. I don't know if you're from St. Louis, you probably remember there was something of a media storm around it. But more importantly, the reaction within the department, and I was a police officer for 5 years. Started off in North St. Louis in the 8th District. I was on the SCAT team for a minute. I was in intelligence, which is one of the more prestigious investigative units on the department. It does a lot of things in conjunction with other agencies, the Secret Service, the FBI, when the president comes in town. Intelligence is the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's liaison to the other agencies. When we put that program together and put those cameras out in that community, and at that time it was not known how many we put out there. they called a meeting of 30 commanders in the St. Louis City Police Department to come together and have a very serious discussion about what they were going to do next. 30 commanders don't meet on anything in St. Louis except if the president is coming to St. Louis. That's been my experience, and that's what the reaction was from them. The program itself, quite frankly, was successful in as much as I think it was something that inhibited some of the aggression that we had seen on the part of some officers, not all of them, but some officers in that part of the community. But it did not, well, let me tell you what happened. Our legal committee, shortly after we put the program in place and began to distribute the cameras, our legal committee came to us and said, look, we've analyzed the situation, we've looked at what you're trying to do, and you can give these people the cameras, but the ACLU cannot have an agency relationship with them. You can't have a, as I had told them up front, you know, at the front end of developing the project, that look, you have a right to do this. We encourage you to do this because, as these gentlemen said, it is a way for you to create an objective record of what happened on the street and thereby empower yourself to perhaps create some accountability on the part of, or an opportunity to hold an officer accountable for abusing his authority when you have an objective record of what happened versus the police report and the IAD investigation that follows your complaint, because we all know what those say. I think it was a federal judge that recently pointed out that, you know, in the last, I don't know how many years, but out of 400 very serious complaints of police abuse in St. Louis, only one of them had been sustained by IAD. But when we had to pull back from the agency relationship, because what we said was if anyone was to try to intimidate you for videotaping the police, threaten you for videotaping the police, or worse, you have us as your advocate, and if necessary, to help mitigate and work through the whole process. We had to go back and tell them that, well, you know what, maybe we don't. And that was a real, it had a major impact on what I thought the program would produce for us. Because people are afraid. You know, you guys, you got some guts, man. I mean, it takes a certain individual to challenge authority like that, face to face, on the street, real time, and really assert your rights, because you have to assert your rights in order to have them. And the history of police interaction with people in North St. Louis, notwithstanding the fact that there are other issues there that may need to be addressed, I'm just talking about, and not just limiting it to North St. Louis, but throughout the country. The history of police interactions in minority communities and poor communities is horrific in many cases, and it's no different there. So they felt like we better not take this risk. We stopped distributing the cameras because what we had to do basically was just give them away and say, do with it what you will. If you get around to videotaping the police encounter with somebody from your neighborhood, please let us know. But you can also take your kid's 5th birthday, or whatever you want to do, the camera is yours and we'll see you later. Right now, there's so much going on in our country relative to authority and how it's exercised. I think we're at a critical point as citizens in terms of making sure that we secure our own rights. And he's right, the police don't have a different set of rights as citizens than we do. That's one of the things about police culture that got me away from it. You know, I was doing good on the department. Had I stayed there, I probably would have advanced. You know, but I was so profoundly disillusioned with our criminal justice system in general, and with the conduct of some of my colleagues, not all of them, because many of those people are good people trying to do a very difficult job, they are. But the number of officers who will abuse that authority willfully, whether they're black officers, white officers, the issue isn't always race and abuse. It's the abuse of the authority and where it takes place. That's what got me out of that mix, man. And this idea within the police culture that somehow we all grew up on the same block. We all grew up on the same block. We played sports together. We went to the same school. We know each other's parents and everything. You 3 guys go to college and pick a career. I walk physically down to St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, fill out my application, it's accepted. I go through the academy, and now somehow I am other than you. Something different than you is us versus them, and we treat them, and it's bullshit, man. It really is. And we have to sometimes remind the police through exercising our authority that no, you are of us. You have chosen to serve us in this way. And that was the choice that you made. So everything that comes with your job is something that you've signed on to, but you are still very much of our society, and we're very much in the same societal system. And it's not a different track for you and a different track for me. So, you know, I really, like I said on the radio this morning, and then I'll shut up because I know we want to get to some questions and answers. I've heard every argument from the police to resist any tool that would provide accountability or a mechanism for us to hold them accountable. They always resist it no matter what it is. And this idea that videotaping police is somehow interfering with what they have to do is foolishness. As long as you're taping what they are doing from a very safe distance and not endangering the officer or the citizen, you should be fine. The idea, and this is the one you hear all the time, and is widely accepted, although increasingly less accepted in the mainstream, this idea that when we do see something heinous on tape, someone being shot without provocation or hit without provocation or beaten without mercy, the Rodney King incident and others, and the officers come on, well, you didn't see what the guy did before that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're not, the law doesn't vest us with authority to enforce vendettas or seek revenge on the street. We have laws to enforce, and then the courts have a role to play. And the idea, the argument that you didn't see what the guy did before we got to him is the same thing as a bank robber saying, well, you didn't know how broke I was before I robbed the bank. It's the same thing, man. It's ridiculous. So I'll shut up after I say that there are advantages to law enforcement with these video cameras and the prevalence of them. St. Louis's own police chief, Dan Eyre, who was a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, we don't see eye to eye on everything, be sure. We don't. But he understands the value of having an objective record of interactions between his officers and citizens in the city they serve. That's why he's pushing to get video cameras in some of his cars and ultimately all of his cars. And most good police departments want exactly that. When I was a police officer, I wish you would record what I'm doing so you can see what professionalism looks like. So you can see what the best of our training looks like when it's put into use on the streets. And the same thing with independent civilian review. I would want somebody riding in the back of the car that I was in so you can come back and tell the community how I am serving. Versus these officers who have this knee-jerk reaction, this us versus them, that you're out to indict me, and I'm protecting myself from exposure to that. So I think it's a terrific idea. I think it's a right that we should exercise as frequently as we can, and I think it's important that we do because we know what happens when we don't and something goes wrong.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, I just have one question for you
Sure.
for clarification, then I'm going to ask both people, both groups a question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. But first of all, just for clarification, when you were talking about the handing out the cameras to people in North St. Louis,
Yeah.
Why was it that the ACLU legally couldn't promise to be their representatives?
The gist of it that we got from our legal committee was liability issues. If something were to happen while someone that we dispatched was out videotaping the police, someone comes up dead, an officer comes up dead, and somehow we could be attached to those circumstances, it could create a potential liability for the affiliate that would be devastating. You know, you're talking about St. Louis we are one of the smaller affiliates in the ACLU, although we are widely recognized within that national organization as one of its more effective affiliates, I'm proud to say. We don't enjoy a huge budget that would be able to sustain a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that could potentially result from something like that. But there was some disagreement even within that legal committee of our own organization, and we may yet revisit the issue. But it came down to the money.